Judges Matter, an organisation that monitors the judiciary of South Africa, has questions regarding the shortlisted candidate list for the Constitutional Court ahead of the April 2024 leg of the JSC interviews. This comes after the Judicial Service Commission released a list of shortlisted candidates for judicial positions in various courts. The candidates for the Apex Court, however, comprise of 5 male candidates: Professor David Israel Bilchitz, Advocate Matthew Chaskelson, Senior Counsel Advocate Alan Christopher Dotson, Judge Tati Moffat Mahoka, and Judge Ashton Skippers. While Judges Matter says it knows that these are excellent candidates, the organisation expected a broader representation, particularly for women.
The list of candidates for the Constitutional Court, all of them, I must say, are excellent candidates. But of course, we have questions about how that candidate list came to be, because one would have expected to have a broader representation, particularly for women. We know that there have been several women who have acted as justices on the Constitutional Court, but the shortlist currently doesn't reflect that there are any women on the list. That poses serious questions about how the acting appointment process is done, because it does seem that only those candidates who were appointed to act in the last 12 months were made to come on the list. And that also includes those who were not given an opportunity, including the legal academic and the senior legal practitioner. So for us as Judges Matter, we would want for there to be more uniformity, transparency when it comes to selecting acting judges for the Constitutional Court.
We continue with this discussion with Judges Matter Research and Advocacy Officer Mbekezeli Benjamin, whom you've just seen there. A very good evening to you, and thank you so much for taking the time to speak to us, Mr. Benjamin. I think one of your colleagues said in the past, given the state of play, a lot of young women lawyers would be despondent at the status quo. Why is it so difficult to infuse inclusivity, especially when it comes to women? As I think this is something that you noted at the last JSC interviews as well.
Good evening to Piso, and good evening to the viewers. Yes, women actually make up 40% of our judiciary, which is a really incredible achievement when you consider that in 1994, there were only 2 women judges out of over 150 male judges. So we have made strides in terms of women representation, but we as Judges Matter are concerned that at the highest levels, women don't seem to come through. If you look at the Constitutional Court since 1994, there have only been 4 women judges in the history of that court, and there's only been 1 white woman judge, and there's never even been an Indian woman judge who's been on the Constitutional Court. And if you look at more broadly in terms of the leadership of the judiciary, there are currently only 3 women who head up the different courts across the country. That is versus the 14 men who hold up the leadership positions in the other courts. And so you see women making up a quite a sizable chunk of the judiciary, but never filtering through to the upper levels, to the upper echelons. And that's where we as Judges Matter are really concerned that even in this list, in the Constitutional Court, there are no women on the list, and there are 5 men who we have no question that they will be excellent justices. But of course, the diversity of the country needs to be reflected even in the judiciary. And that is actually what Section 174 of the Constitution says, that the judiciary must reflect the racial and gender composition of the population of South Africa.
And as you mentioned that on the surface, it appears as if there's great progress when it comes to gender transformation, but you say it's a lot more nuanced, particularly because women find themselves having to balance the issue of personal individual ambition and the so-called quota system, remaining at a particular position to make sure that there is at least inclusivity.
So one of the fortunate things that have not happened in our judiciary is that there was a strict quota system imposed. So we've never had quotas or reservations of how many women there should be, how many black people there should be, or any sort of demographic. There has never been that reservation, and for good reason. So the women who currently make up 40% of our judiciary, most of them have been there simply on merit. They deserve to be in those positions, and many of them have excelled in the positions as judges and justices of our superior court. But where we as Judges Matter are concerned by, again, is that now at the leadership level, there doesn't seem to be a representation of women sufficiently to represent the demographics of the country. And the reason why we raise the representation of women is not just for cosmetic purposes or for superficial purposes to make up a quota. There are really serious reasons why women should be part of the leadership of the judiciary. Right now, the judiciary is discussing a sexual harassment policy. They are also discussing an acting judges policy. And both of those policies will obviously impact the transformation of the judiciary. And if you don't have enough women having a say in the passing of those policies, you can already think of the blind spots that will happen where a particular policy in its implementation will not really, will not really take into account the realities that women face, which include that a lot of women have been excluded from the legal profession, not for anything else, but for reasons of sexual harassment, of gender power and discrimination. And those kinds of things need to be eliminated, and that's why we need more women in leadership positions.
And I want to talk about that because obviously there's a threshold to meet before the interview process. But you said out of that has come a gender bias. You've lamented that as an organization, specifically talking about Judge Phatwane, where there was a debate that arose where she was asked questions about, well, for the past 8 years, you've been trying to pursue the position of the Northern Cape Deputy, Judge President, but at the same time, you also want to be on the SCA. Have you been using this as a stepping stone? A man would have never been asked that question. He would have simply been seen as ambitious and having filled out his quota. I mean, he's the litmus test for why he is a candidate.
Absolutely. A man in the same position would have really been commended for moving up the ranks as quickly as they would. But when it comes to women, they asked questions about their ambition, whether they are far too ambitious, whether they are sitting in positions because they want to hold on to other positions, and not necessarily looking at the merits of that particular candidate. Because you made an example of Judge Phatwane. She's an excellent judge. She was an excellent High Court judge. She's now Deputy Judge President of the Northern Cape High Court. She's excelling in that position. She acted as the Judge President of the Labour Court. She excelled in that position. So for her to face questions like whether she is using these positions to be ambitious, that is ridiculous. It should never ever form part of a JSC interview, let alone any other job interview, because a man would not be asked similar questions. And that is precisely why we're saying that the JSC should actually go out and encourage more women to make themselves available. Okay. And when they do make themselves available, the JSC should be welcoming to them and should make the environment enabling for women to thrive in the judiciary.